Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about the Constitution, which is the form of government that we have after the Articles of Confederation. The Constitution starts in 1789 and we still have it to this day. So let's start talking about how this came to be. How did we get from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution? So the Constitutional Convention is held in 1787. By the late 1780s, it's becoming really clear that the Articles of Confederation wasn't working. And it's getting really hard to get things done with such a weak central government. Remember Shays' Rebellion? We can't even stop farmers under this form of government. So we need to do something to revise it. So in 1787, we have 12 states send delegates, and delegates think of like representatives, to meet in Philadelphia. And the purpose of this meeting is to revise the Articles of Confederation. We need to do something about it. So the delegates have a problem to solve. They need to figure out how to create a stronger central government, but not too strong, because keep in mind, we just escaped a monarchy. We don't want to recreate it here. They're trying to find this delicate balance of a government strong enough to get things done and control the people, but not tyrannical. And while doing this, they realize that they need to start from scratch. The Articles of Confederation is too far gone. It can't be revised, and we need to create a new government. That new government that we end up creating is called the Constitution. And so let's talk about what the Constitution is. So the Constitution becomes the governing document of the United States in 1789, and it provides a framework and set of principles for how the United States government is organized. And keep in mind, it's a set of principles. It doesn't exactly outline what should be done in every situation, but rather a set of broad ideas around which lawmaking decisions could happen. And part of the reason why it's lasted so long is because it's broad enough to be flexible and applied to so many different situations and changed. And the Constitution fixes some of the problems of the Articles of Confederation. Remember, the Articles only had one branch of government, and we fixed this with the Constitution by creating a government with three branches. So a government with three branches, is a principle called the separation of powers, which we'll talk about in a second. So just to kind of recap with the governments that we've experienced so far, okay, we're going back and forth. So first we had the British monarchy, where the king had all the power and the colonies had no power. Then we had the Articles of Confederation, where we didn't have a central government and there was no power for the central government. Then we're going to create the Constitution, where it's more balanced. So let's talk about each of the branches of government and one of the principles of the Constitution with the separation of powers. So if you guys think back to last year in world history, you guys talked about all the philosophers, and the separation of powers was an Enlightenment idea. If you guys remember, Montesquieu, one of his big ideas was the separation of powers, that no one body should have all three types of power. What we end up with when that happens is a king or dictator, which is what the American Revolution freed us from. So we want to separate powers to make sure we don't end up with that again. And the goal of this is to not only give power, but to limit it. We don't want another king, and the idea is to create the three branches of government so that each branch has a job, each branch has a role, and these branches are going to have to work together. They're going to have to argue and cooperate to get things done. So let's talk about what those three branches of government are. So in Article 1 of the Constitution, the legislative branch is set up. Article 2, the executive branch, and Article 3, the judicial branch. So the legislative branch includes Congress, and Congress is made up of two houses, And what are those two houses? So one of the houses in Congress is called the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives is the larger house. Currently, we have 435 members. And the reason why the House of Representatives is much larger is because it's based on a state's population. So, which means the bigger states are going to have more power. The other house is called the Senate, and the Senate is equal. Every single state gets 2 senators regardless of their size. So if we have 2 senators per state, 50 states in the United States, we currently have 100 senators. So just going over our representatives. So in Senate, these are currently our 2 senators. This is Dianne Feinstein. She's been serving in the Senate for California since 1992. This is Kamala Harris. She's been serving since 2016. And here in Downey, this is your representative, Lucille Roybal Allard, and she's your representative for this district. You guys might be wondering how we got to this, how we got to these 2 houses, and that's something that we'll talk about in our next Edpuzzle, something called the Great Compromise. So we have these 2 houses, and their main job, the main job of the legislative branch, is to make laws for the country. That's their main job. Some of the other powers that they have the powers to tax, raise an army, coin money. So these things might sound familiar because you're like, oh, those are the things that the Articles of Confederation couldn't do. So the legislative branch has these powers. And here's some images for you guys. Here's the Senate meeting, and here's the House of Representatives. So in Article 2 of the Constitution, we have the executive branch set up. One major thing that the Articles of Confederation lacked was a powerful executive. And the Constitution solves this. The executive branch includes the president, and the president's the head of the executive branch. It also includes the vice president and the cabinet. The main power, the main role of the executive branch is to enforce or carry out the laws made by Congress. Some of the other powers are to make treaties, appoint officials, but the main role of the executive branch is to carry out and enforce the laws made by Congress. The next branch of government set up in the Constitution in Article 3 of the Constitution is the judicial branch. So the judicial branch, the head of the judicial branch is the Supreme Court. And we also have the federal court system with other lower level courts. And the main job of the judicial branch is to interpret the law. What interpret the law means is basically oversee whether or not things done by Congress and things done by the president follow the Constitution. That's their job. And here's our current Supreme Court justices. So we can see how power is given in the Constitution, right? With the separation of powers, we have the 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, judicial. But how is power limited by the Constitution, right? How does it solve that issue of we want to make sure that each branch of government, no one branch of government is able to become too powerful? And the principle in the Constitution that makes sure not one branch of government can become too powerful is the system of checks and balances. It's this idea that one branch of government can limit the power of another. So each branch of government has the power to do something called check another branch of government. So think of the phrase, I don't know if it's a popular phrase anymore. If you guys have ever heard the phrase, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Maybe that's something you guys don't use anymore, but maybe you've heard it. So in that saying, right, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. What does it mean to check yourself, right? That you're acting crazy. Stop what you're doing. So they have the power, each branch of government has the power to check, to stop another one from becoming too powerful. And the result of this is it takes 2 branches of government to do one task. For example, passing a law. A law is made in Congress, but Congress doesn't do it alone. After a law is made in Congress in the legislative branch, it goes to the president, and the president has the power to sign that law into action, enforce that law, or can veto that law. It makes sure that each branch of government is checked by the other branches, and no one branch would be able to dominate the full government or become too tyrannical like King George's government did. There are many ways that the branches of government can check each other. Here's a few other examples for you guys.